In this video, we're going to go over your most common questions about all things music production in a rapid fire style, so let's dive in. Hey yo, it's Alex from My Music, and as always with this channel, it's my mission to help you, the artist, produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their music in a deeper way. And what I wanted to do for this video is something a little fun, is to answer your most asked, the most common questions that I get asked in my Facebook group, in my community, with my clients, my students, and kind of go through them as fast as I can, rapid fire style, for fun, including the ones that make no sense just for giggles. So here's the story. I have this really cool Facebook group called Music Production for Beginners. So if you're learning about music production, if you want to expand your knowledge, expand your skill sets, ask questions, definitely join in the Facebook group. The link will be below this video. And I have this thing set up that whenever somebody joins the group, there's a field that asks, if there's one question about music production I could answer for you, what would it be? And I have collected all of those replies since the beginning. So I have probably over thousands of questions that you guys have asked. So we're going to kind of try and get through as many of them as possible. Maybe we'll try and do some crazy mad dash and answer every single one in a video down the line. But for now, we're just going to go through a few of them. All right, so as you can see, we got loads of questions. We got questions. And guess what? We got more questions. We got more questions. I got some more questions for you. You want some more questions? Questions. So we're going to start at maybe the bottom and work our way back to the top. To get better at mixing down, I have a military injury in my ear, so I don't hear as well. So I'm trying to learn technical tricks that can help out. All right, this is an interesting question. The first thing that came to mind is that you're going to want to test your ears. And if you haven't tested your ears, or whether or not you have an injury or not, it's always a good idea, because then you're going to know if your hearing is 20/20, so to speak, meaning you can hear all the frequencies properly, or if you have a dip in one ear or the other, or if there's certain frequencies that you can't hear properly. And from there, you're going to have a little bit better idea as to the handicap you have with your hearing and how to address it when you start mixing. And as for some technical tricks to help out with that, I would suggest just starting out to train your ears to hear different frequencies. So you could simply grab one of your favorite MP3s, throw it in your DAW, grab an EQ, and start boosting and cutting different parts of the frequency spectrum and listen to how the song changes, how the sounds start to change when you play around with those different frequencies. And you can also play around with starting to mix some professionally tracked stems. So if you go online, you can definitely find some like professionally recorded sessions that you can start playing around mixing, and you're going to start to train your ears as to what a great sounding track sounds like. Then you're going to be able to start training your ears as to what a great sounding recording sounds like in a pro session, as well as start to play around with the EQ. All right, next question. Great. Next question, learning to properly use compression on vocals. This is a great question, and how you use compression on vocals will actually really affect how it sounds in your final mix and in your production. One thing that is very common with vocals is to compress on the way in. So if you have some outboard gear, or if you have like a UA interface or something that has built-in compression, you can go ahead and compress the vocal as you're tracking it a little bit. So then the audio that you're recording will be printed with a little bit of compression, and it will also help your vocalist just feel more confident. Everything will be more clear, the syllables will pop, and yeah, it'll just be all around a good time. So that's something to consider. Another thing to think about when you're compressing vocals is that the key is to make sure that every syllable is clearly understood and that there is impact to every word, depending on the genre you're working in, of course. So some of the compression settings that I would reach for to compress a vocal would be to have a slow attack and a pretty fast release, decent threshold, and compress it fairly hard. Maybe similar to what you would do on a kick drum and maybe even a snare. And the whole idea of this is that if you have a slow attack, this means that the compressor will only turn on after the initial transient. So there'll be the first part of the sound, the first part of the vocal, and then it's going to compress afterwards. And what that does is it actually makes us perceive that the beginning part of that audio signal is louder, right? Because it's like it's coming through and then it's compressing the second half. So the initial transient gets accentuated has an accent, and it really gives energy to those syllables. And then you want to have a decently fast release depending on the tempo of your vocal so that the compressor goes back to 0 before the next syllable or the next word that is being sung. Connecting music and lyrics. This is a great question. Personally, I'm not a prolific lyricist. I'm not like a vocalist. However, my favorite music mostly has vocals, and I've worked with a ton of vocalists. And one thing that has stuck out to me is that the syllables of the words and the rhythmic timing are very important for vocals, as well as where the melody, because typically the vocal will be singing the main melody. So what notes are the vocals hitting relative to the chords that are going on in your song, the vibe. And I've spoken to many other vocalists that have different approaches to how they connect their lyrics to their music. And some vocalists, they kind of just mouth syllables, they make noises that fit with the song, and then they add lyrics later. And other vocalists write all their lyrics and then they fit it to music afterwards. Just like anything else though, one thing to keep in mind is that when you're starting to come up with lyrics and vocal ideas is to flow them out and not judge them too quickly. Just have fun being in the flow, throw things out and see what sticks. And then afterwards, after you've done that and you have some ideas, then you can take some time to zoom out and craft it and really get the syllables in line, maybe change a word, maybe change the notes you're hitting, that kind of stuff. Where can I download more plugins for my production? You could probably look at the internet. All right, next question. Mixing. Is that a question? Using an interface and DAW. So this is a great question. This is pretty much the foundation of being able to produce music with your computer. And my advice for this would be to keep it super simple, okay? So if you look on the market, there are a plethora of super simple USB interfaces that are plug and play and super easy to use and understand, such as the Focusrite Solo or the Focusrite 2i2, something like that. I've had one, I've used it for over 10 years. It's never failed and it's super simple to use. So maybe look into something like that. And then for a DAW, I would just recommend get a free DAW. So get Ableton, the free version. And yes, it's limited. It doesn't have many options, but you can learn those options. You can learn what you have very well before even needing to invest in anything else. So that's what I would suggest is just like get the free version of Ableton, start learning it with an interface, have some headphones, and Bob's your uncle. Balancing the sound. This is a little bit ambiguous and vague, but I'm still going to answer it. And balancing your sound starts in the recording phase or the sound selection phase, okay? So if you have sounds that don't naturally meld well together, it's going to be tough to balance them in a mix because they'll be competing frequency-wise. Another way to think about balancing is using the most simple yet most powerful tools that you have for mixing is your volume, your panning in the stereo field, and your EQ, as well as automation. And just with those 4 tools, like playing with the volumes, adding EQ to make things brighter or darker, and automating those things using the stereo field, you can get really far in starting to balance your tracks for your mix and train your ears as well to start to hear what those tools can do with automation. How do I get my music to sound right? Great question, guys. Great question. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you and your artistic ear and what resonates with you, what feels authentic, what feels good for music to sound right. However, if you want some guidance as to how to make better compositions or have better sounding mixes, then you can look into learning some music theory, some songwriting, some composition stuff. And on the mixing side, learn your tools, learn EQ, learn compression, and practice, train your ears. And there you go. Too many questions to pick just one. I just need basic info to learn the basic procedures. So what I would say in this case is that when you're just getting started, you can get super overwhelmed. There's so much to learn in music production, like music theory, playing instruments, recording, editing, composition, mixing tools, all the plugins, etc., 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 etc. What I would say is just get your hands dirty, like take action and practice making music. Like just have fun and start making stuff that sounds good to you, play with tools, break things, and that will be the best catalyst for you to start learning what's actually relevant for where you're at and what you're trying to do, instead of filling your head full of all this knowledge that you haven't put into action and haven't really integrated. So this next question just says yes. So I'm just going to assume that somebody didn't understand, I guess, the format of what I was asking for, but my answer is no. Self-promotion. Is that a question? Let's make this a question. So with the idea of self-promotion and promoting your music or your services or whatever, there are many layers to this, and it's very dependent on your goals and where you're at with your music. So I would recommend check out this How to Set Goals for a Music Producer, because that will just clarify what path you want to go down. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be promoting your stuff to people, you have to promote it in a way that people see the value, okay? And that you actually have a connection with people. Because if you just throw out links, hey, check this out, check this out, hey, check this out, check this out, that's all focused on you, and it's not focused on the value you can provide and the experience that you can share with other people. So just make sure to get that right in your promotion strategy, whatever it ends up being. Hey, whoa, time out, guys. Let's pause here for a second. I just want to mention one piece of advice that I've heard that is a great piece of advice, and it is this: the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask. Okay. So that's always a great thing to keep in mind, is that when you're asking questions to yourself or to other people, is that you want to be specific and you want it to be tangible, right? If it's something that's not even a question, or if it's super vague and ambiguous, or it could be interpreted in a million different ways, then it's not going to be a very actionable question. How can I become a better songwriter? That's a great question. My first inclination is to encourage you to write as many songs as possible. Okay, so practice writing songs. Listen to your favorite songs. Listen to the legendary, timeless songs that you grew up on, all of that stuff, and study them and start to understand how those excellent songwriters, those legendary artists, compose those songs, and like what techniques did they use? What did they do to keep you engaged? How did they tell a story with their music? And I think that will be the quickest path to help you grow as a songwriter. How to make good melodies? That's a great question. Melody is this endlessly deep subject, which is fascinating. And in most popular music today, melody is the queen of the universe, so that everything else in the production is serving the main melody. And as for coming up with a good melody, there's a few techniques you could look at. You could look at trying to hit chord tones of your chord progression, jumping in small steps or big steps and anchoring yourself, looking at keeping it singable. Like if you can hum something in your head and it's easy to remember and it's catchy, that's a sign of a great melody. But there's so many different melodies and different genres and ways of doing that I would suggest that you find your favorite melodies and really look at how they're constructed, right? Just observe them and see how they're structured. Like, do they hit chord tones? How do they fit with the chords? How long are the notes? Are they sustained? Are they staccato? Can you sing it? Why is it catchy? Ask yourself all those kinds of questions, and I think it will help you start to make some better melodies. And hey, if you're just getting started with music production, feeling completely overwhelmed by the process, or if you've been at this for a while but are having trouble finishing those projects, or if you just want to get a glimpse inside my personal workflow and the workflow I teach to my clients and my students, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework that goes over every step of the process, all the way from your first ideas to a finished master, and really outlining the psychology and the steps behind each of those phases. And it answers a lot of the questions we've gone over today. So if you're interested in grabbing that, you can find it in the description. And I would love to know, what is your top music production question that's been on your mind? What's the biggest problem that you're kind of facing on your musical journey? Is there any specific skill sets or things you're trying to learn right now? If you have a question, leave it in the comments below, and I'd love to answer it and have a conversation about it. All right, and that wraps it up for this video. And as you can see from my list, I've probably only answered like 1%, maybe not even 0.5% of all the questions that came in. So I hope this was useful. Hope this gave you some perspective, had some fun. And with that said, I'll love you and leave you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thousands of questions. Just question man.